Hello everyone, I'm Inverse and this is Build Order Breakdowns, Volks Volks Sniper MG. Today we are going to take a look at a game from South Angoville. It's going to be a game against Naslu Reborn, who is a level 16 American player. And just before we get things started, I just want to bring something up. Just want to kind of reiterate that the strategy that I'm going to be talking about and the mindset I'm going to be talking about this cast is by no means the only way to play the Volks Volks Sniper MG strategy. I'm not even claiming it is necessarily the best way to play the Volks Volks Sniper MG strategy. It is, however, the best way for me to play the Volks Volks Sniper MG strategy, and as a result is the style and the way of playing that I'm most familiar with. The replays that will be coming after the map-specific replays with other players in the community will give you more of a chance to see a broader range of different transitions, different openings, different tactical ways of thinking in regards to the build. The map analyses, however, are going to be purely from my head, how I'm thinking, what I'm thinking, and why I'm doing what I'm doing in relation to the build. I've had a decent amount of success with this build. I'm not claiming to know everything about it, however. So with that in mind, let's get this game going. Just a teeny tiny note that I will be watching these games with the Fog of War on. Just feel like it will help out a little bit more with kind of describing what I am thinking based on the information given and how I'm reacting and anticipating what my opponent is doing. I will be skipping or speeding up and slowing down at certain times. I'll be pausing every once in a while, speeding up at more dull times, and I might not even watch the entirety of all of the games, as outside of the early and mid game, it really plays out as a standard Wehrmacht versus Americans type of game with a tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, or tier 1, tier 2 with vetted grenadiers. But we will of course get to that in a little bit once we get on with this game a little bit more. Just a tiny note about the capping order. A lot of people cap this point with their first Volks squad. I will cap this point with my first Wehrmacht quarter squad with other strategies. With the Volks Volks Sniper MG, however, I like capping this with the Pioneer, because regardless if you cap this point first and then this point, you're going to cap this point unless your opponent is super aggressive, which Naslu in this situation is fairly aggressive. However, you will see I will be able to get this point up. And the reason I like to cap with the Pioneer instead of the Volks is because this lets me send the Volks straight over to the left hand side and pressure a little bit. This is very, very, very important with this strategy. You want to be as aggressive with your Volks as possible. You do not want to be capping very much with your Volks. You don't need the map control very much. Of course, the map control you do need is munitions and not fuel, but that is of course something I will get to in a little bit once we actually get some map distribution going on. But as you see right there, force the engineer off. I very well might have been able to force it off if I had capped this point. However, this makes it absolutely certain he's going to have to send in a rifle squad up here to support that. I am going to get a little bit of utility out of this Volks squad, just capping this point right now. And we do see the first rifle squad on the left hand side. This makes me very, very comfortable doing this. I know for sure he cannot have a second rifle up in time. You see my second Volks out, and the time your second Volks is out is about the same time as your opponent's second rifle. So I know right about now I need to be a little bit worried about where his second rifle is going to show up. However, I do know one rifle is over here, and I have a Volks squad right here, so I'm perfectly comfortable pushing up right here. If my opponent had, say, his two rifles over here and he wasn't trying to cap this point, I would not at all push up and try to cap this point. It puts me in an extremely vulnerable position if my opponent is really aggressively trying to push for the left hand side. Now I am splitting up my Volks a little bit, and with this in mind, I'm going to have to accept being forced to retreat if my opponent attacks intelligently. He is probably going to have 3 rifles right about now. My sniper is about a third of the way done. A sniper takes a lot longer to start because it costs more, and it takes a lot longer to build than a rifle squad. So this is the one of the 2 or 3 main points of vulnerability in this strategy. We see a rifle squad flanking around right here, looking for looking like he's going for an attack. We have a second rifle squad right here. This squad's going to stop capping because I decapped, which is all I need to do. I want to get a little bit of damage in. I'm going to hop into cover with this squad. However, my opponent very, very smartly is going to charge with these two rifle squads. So you are going to see in a second right there, very, very quick retreat. Reason for that is I want to preserve as much manpower as humanly possible in the early game. Manpower very, 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 very important. I also have my sniper on the field right now, so I'm not too worried about him forcing a retreat, because a sniper is a very, very fluid unit. It is not a static unit like MGs and like the typical Wehrmacht units are. It's very, very useful in pushing and very, very useful early game because it forces your opponent to react to you. You see me microing back. Snipers, of course, moving at the same speed as the rifles, so I'm going to take a few shots and keep moving back. Rifles without bars, not very effective at killing snipers. I do, of course, have my supporting MG. This is going to suppress this one rifle squad, force that to retreat, and right now I am in an excellent position. I forced one retreat. I've done a lot of damage with the sniper. I already have 4 kills right away. I'm going to cap this point and then probably get out of there right away. Furthermore, you may have noted this mine right down here. Very, very important mine. Mines are absolutely essential, as I mentioned in the first video in the build order breakdown, just general build guide, that mines essential to the strategy. You see my munitions staying very, very low. I will not be getting flamers at all, at least not in the early game. There are situations mid-game where you might want flamers, but if any of those situations come up in a replay, I will definitely point them out. One thing to note is my medic bunker is a tad bit late. Of course, you see right here, getting the tier 2 upgrade before the med bunker. Usually you want to get the med bunker up before the tier 2 upgrade. However, in some situations such as this one, I didn't have a pioneer and I didn't have the map control needed to get that med bunker up. So I got the tier 2 upgrade quicker, and then I'm going to get my med bunker. If you find yourself floating manpower before the med bunker, just get the tier 2 upgrade a little bit quicker, and understand that you are going to want to get the med bunker beforehand, if at all possible. Now, if we open up the tactical map right now, we're going to notice I have not tried to push up on the right hand side at all. I capped a little bit at the beginning, and the point of capping at the beginning over here is taking what your opponent is going to give you. If my opponent is going to let me cap up here and slow him down and cap this point and get these resources on the right hand side, like, I would be stupid not to take it. However, that is not at all my focus. You see me getting tier 2 up. I have my one mine down here. I actually do not have a second mine because I did spend the munitions on the med bunker. That's something you kind of have to proactively think about. And right before this big flank comes in, I just want to point out the wiring I've been doing. This wiring over here, just to prevent my opponent from using the green cover. It's a very, very useful tactic to employ on maps with haystacks and green cover walls, such as walls like this. Furthermore, this wire on the left hand side is something I really like to do on this map. It really narrows my opponent's approaches, my opponent's possible approaches. As you can see, he doesn't have an engineer up here, so he is going to have to come down here in order to attack me. For this one instance, of course, he is going to be able to send an engineer up, make a few cuts if he wants, but this is a long piece of wire. He's not going to be able to cut it all the way. And furthermore, I put the wire in front of this little strip of green cover. I mean, yellow cover, light cover. And the reason being is there's literally no difference between putting it here and putting it here, except this gives you the light cover rather. Not the green cover, light cover, and this gives your opponent the light cover. You definitely want it on your side. Just going to get things going right now and point out this is the second vulnerability in this strategy. We saw the first vulnerability. I'm actually going to pause it right now. Just explain this concept because it's very, very important. And the moment you understand this and you prepare for this mentally and in game, you're going to increase your success rate with this strategy extremely, or a lot, actually, not extremely. That doesn't make any sense. But the main vulnerabilities in this strategy, you just want to think about it this way. You are spending money on your sniper. That is an investment that is not going to help you against flanks. A sniper is not good at all at defending flanks. It shoots too slowly, it doesn't do enough damage, and it doesn't suppress. MGs suppress and deal a lot of damage. Volks squads, comparable to rifles in the damage they deal. If you go for a standard tier 1, it comes straight down to micro. Are you able to out micro your opponent? This strategy, however, is a little bit different, because while you're building your sniper, your opponent is going to have his third rifle squad on the field. That means you are going to have 2 pioneers and 2 Volks squads. Your opponent is going to have 2 engineers and 3 rifle squads. Unless you have impeccable positioning and your opponent screws up, you are not going to be able to defend a flank. You are not going to be able to keep map control. In this case, I was able to keep map control because my opponent did not pressure me too much. However, in a lot of the games you're going to play, you're going to notice your opponent is going to attack at that time, because a smart player is going to attack the moment he builds a unit, because that is the greatest chance of your opponent not being prepared. If your opponent slipped up a little bit, or if your opponent is being greedy and doing a build like I am doing and like we are analyzing right now, it is a perfect timing to do a lot of damage. In this case, I have, as we can see, my 2 Volks and my MG and my sniper, and I'm getting tier 2 up. I have now invested the 200 manpower and 35 fuel in the tier 2 upgrade, and now the 220 manpower and 25 fuel into the Krieg barracks. I have not seen any return for those investments. If my opponent pops bars right now, and I'm not saying he does, actually don't remember, I did watch this game right before, but actually do not remember if he pops bars. But if he does pop bars, I am almost certainly going to be forced to retreat. This is where mines play a pivotal role in this strategy. You see, I do have this 1 mine down here. I do not, however, have any other mines, because my opponent has done a good job of keeping me off the munitions point, most notably that point right down there. As you can see, I only have 15 munitions. I also have my med bunker. This is a very tense situation, especially because I was forced to retreat with this 1 Volks squad. Let's get this game going a little bit more right now and just kind of notice what I am talking about right now. This is about the time bars will be popped. It's actually a little bit too late for bars. Bars would have been popped about 30 seconds earlier. We see on the game clock 7 minutes right now. Bars are usually closer to the 6-minute mark. However, we do have a very big flank right now. Focusing a little bit, I'm going to pause the game once again, because there's a lot to talk about at this instance, or at this instant rather. We see I am focused around the med bunker. My opponent coming at me from a very large number of angles. We have this 1 mine down here, definitely slowing him down. I'm going to want to get my Volks squad out as soon as possible, and the only way I am going to be able to defend this flank is by using my MGs while staying in cover and focus firing as much as possible. The main priority when you are being flanked like this is to pay attention to your sniper. You do not want to lose focus on your sniper and get him killed by rifles, especially without bars. And in a flank like this, you need to be conscious of the fact that your opponent may be popping bars in the middle of this engagement. Always at times like this, when you do not quite know, you have a little bit of you kind of suspect, just because of the time that this attack comes and the lack of bars, that your opponent is going for an M8, at least I do. You still have to be careful and you have to be wary of that possibility. Alright, just going to play and just kind of pay attention to the little bit of micro sniper shooting. You always want to try to focus on 1 squad at one time. Force a squad to retreat. I did see this engineer retreat, which is why I am sending my MG into the bunker, and inside this bunker right now it is, yeah, see right here, opponent retreating, and the reason for that is it is actually a very smart retreat. He would not have been able to get this MG out of this building, out of this bunker rather. And with my sniper and my retreating Volks squad, he would have lost way too much manpower. Even if he had forced me off, he would have lost a lot of manpower, and that is your goal, and that has to be your goal. This 1 mine, of course, doing a lot of damage. 2nd mine going down right here, still low on munitions, excuse me, but we do see back at home I am going for the pack, and the reason for this is that attack right there. If he was going to go for bars, Naslu, of course, a very good player, if he was going to go for bars, he would have had bars during that attack or before that attack. The lack of bars during that attack is a enormous, huge tell that my opponent is going for an M8. Of course, he may be trying to trick me and something like that, but if he is trying to trick me and he does go for bars later on, that is perfectly fine. I'm perfectly fine with that because I am now in an extremely favorable position. We do see I am pushing in on the right hand side a little bit, and the reason for that is I really want this munitions point. We see I only have a 27 munitions income right now, and there we go, the M8 on the right hand side, pack out of course just in time. My opponent is maybe going to base rush, I'm not really sure. On the left hand side, I did get a bike, and the reason I got a bike was twofold. I'm just going to kind of pause this because I do not get this every game. I absolutely don't get this every game. One reason for me getting the bike was I was a little suspicious about the lack of any sort of tech tell. Of course, the moment I get my bike, he shows me his M8, so I was a little bit, I kind of jumped the gun on this bike. However, a bike extremely useful for scouting, even if you drive it in and you get to see, hey, does he have a weapon support center? Does he have a supply yard and a motor pool yet? Does he have just a supply yard and he doesn't have a motor pool yet, which is a pretty good indication that he's going to be getting a weapon support center and an early supply yard upgrade. Stuff like that, just little tidbits of information. Of course, if he does go weapon support center, hey, I already have a bike. Bike, not a very big investment, and definitely if you do not know what your opponent is doing and you have the extra manpower and you already have the AT to make you safe against an M8 were it to come, getting a bike, never a bad idea, especially if you run it in and just kind of see what your opponent is doing. With strategies such as this one with the early sniper play, it is definitely valuable just in the sense that my opponent almost certainly going to be getting a counter snipe at some point during this game. We see using this for a little bit of scouting right now. Continuing to keep my sniper mobile. You notice I am keeping my sniper decloaked. At this point in the game, if I had not seen that M8, or if I had not seen bars or an M8 or anything like that, I would be cloaking this sniper. The reason I'm not cloaking is because he's invested a lot into his motor pool tech, and I know he's not going to have a counter snipe out in time to, or at least not yet. So I still have a few minutes, I'd say, to kind of use this sniper as freely as I could possibly want. You see this little bit of wire right here, as I was saying, wiring off the opposite side of green cover, never a bad thing. This is actually very annoying. I'm not sure if I wire this off, but I think I'm probably going to wire this off. An opponent who uses his early vehicle to knock down this fence is... it's frustrating, and it presents a problem because if my opponent sends a bunch of infantry in down this side and right through here, there's not really too much I can do about it. Now notice I do have my 1 Gren on the field. Of course, I'm going to be getting a 2nd Gren on the field. The completely standard follow-up to this when you're going tier 2, which is what you're going to be going 99% of the time, at least when you're learning it. There are, of course, some situations where tier 3 can be warranted, such as a weapon support center and bars early game, or bars and grenades early game while you still have map control. But for the most part, we're just going to focus on tier 2 because it is the safest and most standard way to play this strategy. You're not going to lose to anything surprising like fast tank depot or fast M8s, something like that. We see my opponent actually is taking advantage over here on the right hand side, and at this point it becomes a priority of killing this M8. You want to be paying attention down here to whether or not your opponent lays a mine right here. If he does, you are of course going to have to be a little bit careful. He actually missed microed right here, letting his M8 take 2 hits. And I'm going to focus down the engineer because repairing units of course take more damage, and if I can manage to kill the engineers, I am going to probably be able to kill this M8. We see my sniper just going to be continually moving him around, actually getting dangerously close to the opponent. I'm probably going to retreat. Yeah, I'm going to retreat. Never a bad idea. Actually, do kill the M8. Never a bad idea to retreat. Do not be afraid to retreat at all. I do lose my bike, which is unfortunate. However, I deal a lot of manpower damage to my opponent. I'm just going to pause after that to note the just kind of tech transition out of the tier 1 play for this strategy. The completely standard tier 2 build is either a pack or a Gren. A pack if you don't see any rifle upgrades or a weapon support center. A Gren if you see any of those, so grenades, bars, or a weapon support center. And then the next afterwards, you can of course squeeze out a second Gren. I'd actually say if you have the 75 munitions to get a Panzerschreck and your opponent went for infantry upgrades, I would go Gren pack. And the reason for that is a Gren with a Panzerschreck, though not ideal, is definitely more than enough to delay a M8 if your opponent for some reason went super fast M8 right after his bar upgrade. Whereas a pack going to be completely useless against any sort of infantry if your opponent did in fact or did not in fact go for any sort of vehicle play at all. You of course want that pack just to be safe eventually, but the key, and you'll kind of get used to this and you'll get better at this as you get more experience and you play for a bit more, the key to Wehrmacht is putting off what you do not need for as long as possible. You need to be safe. Wehrmacht is by nature more a reactionary race than Americans are, at least in the early game. The American is going to be forcing the Wehrmacht player to react. The one exception to this is of course the early sniper, which forces a reaction out of the American player, which is why I like the strategy so much, because it puts a lot of American players out of their comfort zone. They're used to being in control of the early game, and the early sniper kind of takes that away from them. But for the most part, Wehrmacht is reactionary in the early game, and the key to playing Wehrmacht successfully is reacting properly for as long as possible and not overreacting. An overreaction would be getting 2 packs when your opponent's only getting 1 M8, or getting, say, a pack after a Gren when your opponent went bars because you're worried about vehicles, when in reality there is no vehicle threat coming. So after that, after the 2 Grens and the pack, whichever order you decide to get them out, it becomes more of a transition period with the units you have on the field, provided you haven't lost any. This is of course assuming rather clean play in the sense that you haven't lost full squads yet. There are 2 transitions possible, or at least 2 main transitions possible: the infantry vet transition and the tier 3 transition. We are going to see in a second that I am going for the tier 3 transition. The reason for that is my opponent went for motor pool. If my opponent goes for motor pool, like very, very hard motor pool, or if he goes for bars and not much else afterwards, like if he goes for bars and then does not follow up with a counter snipe or an M8, I will more likely than not go for the vetted infantry play. And the reason for that is vetted infantry play far more useful against a American player who goes for tier 4, or rather tank depot. And the reason for that is your infantry needs to be oh, that sucks. Counter snipe. So your infantry needs to be superior to his if he goes tank depot. But I won't really talk about that too much this game, because I am going for tier 3. We see I actually canceled it in order to get a counter sniper out a little bit quicker. The reason for that was if I had built the Sturm Armory before getting the sniper just would have been a little bit later. So I am going to very, very soon get my Sturm Armory up. But I do know now my opponent went for motor pool and then back teched to weapon support. With that in mind, I can most likely assume a bar transition out of this, just because he seems to be transitioning into countering my tier 2 play, which is a main reason for me sticking on, or transitioning rather, into the tier 3 play myself, rather than sticking on tier 2 play where he is very, very able to counter it. Actually lose a Grand Squad right there. I don't know why I charged him like that. That was actually very, very stupid. So let's forget that ever happened. I do have my counter sniper out right now. Counter sniping is a little bit tricky. It comes down to picking a moment where you tell yourself you're going to give up on forcing the counter snipe and start doing damage with your sniper, because a sniper that's not doing anything is a 340 manpower investment completely wasted. We do see a fairly big flank for Wilson Noslu. Right now I'm going to want to retreat this squad sooner rather than later. I actually might lose this Volks, which would not be good. I do, however, have this MG right here, which is going to allow me to hold this extremely easily. I did take a shot, actually did counter snipe right there. So my opponent's sniper is dead now, and with that my opponent is going to be forced to retreat. I still maintain control of the left hand side. I am going to be getting a Puma out very, very quickly. And the main how should I word this? What you need to be thinking about is trying to counter what it is your opponent is going for. If you see your opponent trying to counter your tier 2 play, don't give him any more tier 2 units to counter. Give him tier 3 units, which means he is going to have to shift his focus. He is either going to have to invest in anti-tank and risk the weaknesses of the anti-tank, which is being sniped and being charged by Grens and Nebels, or tech the tank depot, at which moment he will be extremely vulnerable and will not really be able to react to my Puma play with a lot of effectiveness, which is the route that I will be going, and just kind of going to be paying attention to how it plays out. Just a little note on pushing out on the right hand side. We'll notice I haven't really aggressively tried to cap this right hand side. I've been perfectly content. I've had this entirety of the left hand side, which is more than enough for what I need to be doing at this point in the game. We do see the VPs 344 for me, so they are ticking down a little bit because, of course, Noslu with the two VPs on the right hand side. However, that's not really a super big deal at this point in the game, and you never really want to push out until your tech investment has kicked in. So until you either have Vet 2 on your Grenadiers, and you are continually building Grenadiers, of course, as you're getting this, or until your Pumas are on the field. The tech investment allows you to be far more mobile against Americans. Without the tech investment, Wehrmacht kind of has to play a pretty static, pretty defensive game if they want to play it safe, at least in my opinion. There are some aggressive ways to play Wehrmacht, but I feel any sort of really super aggressive Wehrmacht play can be picked apart by smart and equally aggressive American play. So it's very, very important to not be too aggressive until you know you can afford it and you know you can get away with it. And that point usually comes once your tech investment has kind of kicked in a little bit. So once I get my Puma out, once I say get my Vet out, all that sort of stuff. We do see a fairly big flank out on the field right now. We'll notice I do still only have one MG, and the reason for that is I generally do not get a second MG unless I see early bar play. This game was, of course, a fast M8. We do see a artillery barrage on the bunker. I'm going to retreat my sniper and back away. This is a perfectly fine, this is 100% fine at this point in the game. If he does kill it, which it looks like he might, I can absolutely just rebuild it, and I have not really lost that much. That was actually a little bit sloppy, but I'm not going to talk about that and just pretend it didn't happen. Yay! But at this point, I have one Puma. I'm floating a little bit, so I'm probably going to want to get a second Puma and a Comcraft Center up very, very shortly. Even when you go for the Puma plate, you generally want to follow it up with vetted infantry. In pretty much all situations, even if your opponent has shown weapon support center play, and even if he already has a sniper on the field and you have not been able to kill that sniper, you absolutely 100% of the time want to get Vet 2 on your infantry. And the reason for that is it just makes Grenadiers exponentially more cost effective and more valuable. It's very, very rarely that you're going to play an American player who does not get the bar upgrade. And without Vet 2, it is very, very difficult for Grens to actually make use or actually combat the barred rifles. Very, 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 very difficult. So with that in mind, I will probably get a Compcraft Center up fairly shortly. I'm in a very, very, very confident and very strong position right now. You see, I am finally pushing out on the right-hand side because, of course, I am able to. I should be sending a Puma over to the right-hand side as well, but I am not yet. Focused on other things, I assume. Back at the base, not building anything. And at this point, it kind of drifts away from being a Volks Volks Sniper MG specific build to sort of being whatever you like to do into the mid and going on the late game. We're kind of past the mid game now at 19 minutes into this replay. It kind of goes into the late game. In this situation, based on my opponent's unit composition, I am partial to a lot of tier 3 units. I will probably stop at 2 Pumas. I am getting my second Puma right now. I am going to be getting veterancy. After my 2 Pumas are out, I will straight tech as fast as I can to vet 2 on my infantry. And then I will most likely get a Nebelwerfer. And the reason for that is, of course, to combat the AT guns. And my game is lagging. So I'm going to pause it for a second and just kind of wait for the lag to disperse. But in the meantime, I'm just going to talk a little bit about my opponent going for the artillery play. Bodes very, 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 very well for what I am doing at this particular moment. And the reason for that is he is investing fuel and manpower into straight anti-infantry, and at this point I've kind of transitioned a little bit away from the infantry heavy play into more vehicle and tech heavy play. I'm of course transitioning back gradually, however not really a very, very heavy transition, and at this point my position fairly comfortable, at least in relation to where my opponent is at. And this lag is not going away. So I think I'm going to restart the recording. Actually, no. Just as I say that, it fixes itself. Hooray for my buggy computer. Alright, so with that in mind, let's just see how the mid and late game pans out. Always a good idea to keep your grenadiers spread out as much as possible when you know your opponent has artillery. You never want him to be able to target more than one squad at a given time and hit more than one squad at a given time with his artillery. You see, I do have my Vet 1 for infantry already up. I am splitting up my Pumas. Or where's my second Puma? Where's my second Puma? There's my second Puma. I'm splitting up my Pumas. That was actually a little bit of miss micro, and it is lagging again. So I am going to restart the recording, and we'll be right back. Alright. Let's keep our fingers crossed that fixed everything. And get things going right now. I got counter-sniped again. And all this investment into a whole heck of a lot of anti-infantry. We saw the howitzer, of course, the other counter-sniper. And this all makes me very, very comfortable continuing on the tier 3 route. I am probably going to get Vet 2 as soon as I possibly can. And just going to mention my doctrine choice because I actually haven't talked about that at all. I am partial to, it is doing it again. I am partial to the terror tech path with this strategy, and the main reason for that is just kind of the fact that I prefer a more passive style of play. I do know there are some people who like this strategy with blitz. I personally just play it a whole heck of a lot with Terror. I am most comfortable with Terror. I really enjoy the bonuses that Zeal give you. Early game, they make your Volks Grenadiers last longer. They make your MGs better. They make your Grenadiers better. They just make it a lot easier for you to play in the early and mid game against any sort of aggressive American play. Of course, they're not going to help you out too much against M8s and snipers. But one of the main weaknesses of this strategy is a well-executed and multiple well-executed bar flanks, and Zeal really helps with that. Furthermore, the King Tiger, never a bad thing to have in the late game. And let's see if everything stops lagging. Now we do see my opponent kind of switching up and pushing a little bit on the right hand side. I mean the left hand side rather. And this is perfectly fine. I'm not too worried about that. The reason for that is I have an extremely mobile force right now. I'm not getting Vet 2 yet. I will be getting Vet 2. I'm getting another sniper. I am capping VPs. VP is very important at this point in the game because right about now your opponent is racing against the clock. I'm going to have a KT in CP in 3/4. Let's just say 2 CPs. That sounds so much cleaner. I'm going to have a KT in 2 CPs, so I need to delay my opponent reducing VPs as much as possible. We do, of course, have an AT gun on the field, so it does look like my opponent is sticking on the motor pool tech and not really teching any further into tank depot. If I did not see this AT gun, I would begin to... Ooh, excuse me. Wow. Oh, that was a big burp. I completely apologize if you have headphones on and you just heard me burp straight into your ear. That's probably disgusting. But I completely lost my train of thought after that. Oh my goodness, what was I talking about? Oh yeah, he is probably not going for tank depot at this point. If he hadn't shown me that AT gun, I would be a little bit worried about tank depot play, and I would most likely get a second pack and another Shrek on my Grans. You see, I do already have 2 Shreks on my Grans. I wasn't able to counter snipe. That's unfortunate. And at this point, it just comes down to a fairly standard US versus Wehrmacht late game where I'm going to lose a Gran. That really sucks. Oh my goodness. I am so terrible. Where the Wehrmacht player is, of course, just trying to fend off until King Tiger, which is the style of play I prefer and the style of play I am, at least in my opinion, best at. I do not have Vet 2 yet on my infantry. That annoys me, but I have been spending a lot of manpower on reinforcing. My opponent has been doing a good job of picking his engagements and has actually clawed his way back a little bit from a fairly disadvantageous, I guess, not advantageous position early game to being kind of even with me. It's actually, I do not have an overwhelmingly awesome advantage. At this point, I would still like to be able to pick a side, but I would prefer that side be the right hand side. However, my opponent not really able to, or not really allowing me to have that luxury of being able to pick sides at this point, which is very good, because late game you really want to be switching over from the left hand side to the right hand side, because the right hand side has the VPs. It is a little bit better for Wehrmacht. It does, of course, have the hedges, which makes Pumas and Grands and MGs a little bit more difficult to deal with. However, it is not at all a bad side. It is difficult at times if your opponent knows how to abuse the hedges and stuff like that, but for the most part, not too difficult. We see pushing up and capping as much as possible for as long as my opponent will allow me to cap. We see now the Vet 2's coming finally, and free Grands. Woo! So the Med Bunker almost always paying off, but at this point in the game you want to be capping as much as possible and trying to force your opponent to push you off wherever he deems it necessary. You will especially be able to do this once you get Vet 2, because your infantry will gain parity with your opponent's infantry. One Gren will easily be able to compete with one rifle squad once you get Vet 2. Once you get Vet 3, one Gren will almost certainly be able to beat a rifle squad in a straight up engagement. I actually have not revealed this sniper, which is a little bit uneasy because I've had it for a long time and it hasn't really done anything for me. It's a fairly hefty investment, the 340 manpower, and it definitely has not paid off at this point in the game. Vet 3 popping up right now. Continuing to harass on the left-hand side, laying mines, of course. Still, a Terror player does not have too much use for mines in the late game. He doesn't have any super heavy munitions abilities like bundle grenades and For the Fatherland that blitz and defensive have. He has, of course, Prop War, which is very, very useful for defending snipers and just getting rid of groups of units you really do not like and do not want to have to deal with at a certain time, because say you're not in position or you are reinforcing with a key squad or something like that. I actually do not use it much this game, I do not believe, but we will see some games, I'm sure, with Prop War being used to save snipers and being used defensively, because that is the main use of Prop War. You can, of course, be cutesy with it and force retreat, cloak snipers, and all that fun stuff, but we're not really going to focus on that since it's kind of a gimmicky style of play, and I really want to focus on solid, consistent, stable ways of playing, because that is really the best way to improve and the best way to have consistent success in any RTS really, but Company of Heroes especially, just because there are so many variables and there are so many different and unusual strategies that players use that newer players can kind of get roped into thinking, hey, I want to try that. That's kind of interesting, when in reality the best way, at least in my opinion, the best, safest, and most consistent way to play is safe and consistent and stable, solid play that doesn't really require and rely on any sort of gimmicks, any sort of surprise and deceiving your opponent. You do not want to focus and rely on tricking your opponent. You want to be able to say, hey, this is what I'm doing, come beat me. And if you play and you execute your game plan as you would like to, and your opponent executes his game plan, you are saying, I do not care if you know what I'm doing, because I know what I'm doing, and I know I'm going to be able to beat you regardless of what you do, because I'm going to be able to outplay you. And that is the key, like the number one, the measure of success in practice is playing someone and telling them, I'm going to do this, and playing them until you can beat them, even though they know exactly what you're doing and they are actively trying to hard counter what you're doing. At this point, I am waiting for the KT, and I am going to fast forward just a little bit because this is turning into more of a standard, just kind of late game KT against motor pool engagements. Of course, focusing on the right hand side because that is where the VPs are. M8, actually a new M8. Not really sure if that was a built M8. I'm thinking it was from an off-map combat group, because this late in the game I don't see Naslu really having much reason and much incentive to build that extra M8. I do have a Puma on the left-hand side, just kind of defending, splitting my units up slightly, but not so much so that I cripple myself on my main front, which is this right-hand side. Two snipers now for my opponent. Nebel's very, very, very important against snipers late game. One of my personal weaknesses, one of the things I have the most difficulty with personally, and this might end up biting me in the butt if someone listens to me and then plays me in a tournament or something, is late game sniper transitions from Americans. I find them just extremely, extremely powerful. If all of a sudden my American opponent late game's like, hey, I'm going to build two snipers, and he builds two snipers, and just start shooting me, because Grenadiers are excellent. You need Grens against tank depot play. You generally need Grens against motor pool play. And I'm actually going to pause the game right now and kind of suspend that one thought to point something out right now, just a little micro note. You see this M8 at very, very low health, chasing it down with a Gren squad. Just want to pay attention to what I do. I don't right click right on the M8. I move my Gren squad up before continuing to attack that. And the reason for that is, while waiting for the cooldown and the reload on the Panzerschreck, there's no point just right clicking on the M8, because your Grens are going to stay at long range, at maximum range, and continually try to shoot the M8. And if the M8 keeps moving, you're not going to be able to shoot him. So the best way to deal with something like that is to move within range while you are waiting for the reload to come off cooldown, and then right click and attack. And you will be in range, you will not stutter around, and if you hit the shot, you will actually shoot it, first of all, and if you hit it, you will kill the M8. So yay, micro tips. Woo. At this point, my opponent really doesn't have a solid answer to the King Tiger. You see I did counter snipe right there, so that was very good for me. You'll notice I'll actually check. I'm going to pause and take the fog of war off for a second right now and take a look at his howitzer. Only 4 infantry kills right now, and the main reason for that is, if we open up the tactical map right now, we see I am never overlapping with any of my infantry. I am never stacking on top of each other. Even if I am engaging with a bunch of infantry squads, it is very, very, very easy to select a bunch of infantry and then hit tab and tab through and just issue move orders. Just kind of spread them out along the front. You never want them clumped up, especially against an infantry player. But my opponent can counter snipe, so that sucks. But I'm actually going to put the fog of war back on. Naslu, not really with an answer to anything I have at this point in the game. King Tiger against 1 AT gun. Map control in my favor now. And I'm just going to fast forward so we get to the end of the game. Since we've come this far, we might as well finish the actual replay. I don't think anything funny or awesome happens later on, so that's kind of unfortunate. There was a prop war, so I could save this AT gun, just because I really, really wanted that AT gun. Because hey, an AT gun in my hands is one less AT gun in his hands. Even if I do manage to decrew it, he can of course recrew it, and I would much rather recrew it than have him recrew it. Dum de dum de dum. Replay almost done. Come on, I can't not breathe any longer. Replay and I couldn't do it, guys. I'm sorry. Yay, dead air. Replay's gonna end, guys. There we go. The replay is over. So hopefully this gave you guys a little bit of an insight into how I like to play Volks Volks Sniper MG going from South Angoville. Next replay analysis will of course be from North Angoville. It'll be a lot of the same stuff. I will focus a lot more on just the early game, because early game does play out a little bit differently. Not too much differently, but a little bit differently, and we will perhaps see a different transition out of the American player, and likewise a different transition out of me. But yeah, thanks for watching, guys. Sorry for the lag issues. Hopefully I'll be able to edit it out and do some magic and you won't really be able to notice it all too much. But thank you for watching. If you like what you see, of course, do not hesitate to subscribe. It really helps me out a lot. Furthermore, check out my stream on twitch.tv/InverseTV. I am streaming pretty much daily now. I do a lot of Volks Volks Sniper MG, a lot of different stuff. I play random with vanilla and try to interact with the stream, talk about what I'm doing in game, talk about my thought process, all that kind of stuff. So check it out. Follow, of course. Check me out on Twitter, twitter.com/InverseTV. Good to see when I'm streaming, when I am posting videos, all that fun stuff. But yeah, thanks for watching, guys, and I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something, and I'll see you guys in the next segment.